John McMullen, I'm Jody McDonald. That makes us Mac and Mac here on Birds 365, and we try and bring you good guests each and every single show. We've accomplished that today because John Stolnis from Bleeding Green Nation jumps in with us here on Birds 365. JS, Harrison Butker kicks it through the uprights. All right, yeah. The Eagles got off one more play. Quick kickoff, and then Jalen Hurts, unfortunately, either stepped on somebody's ankle or slipped, didn't come close to throwing a good Hail Mary to end the game. Pick whichever of those two plays you so choose. What's the first thing that went through your mind of the what ifs? Well, what if this had happened? What if that had happened? What was the biggest what if for you in the Eagles' loss to the Chiefs on Sunday?
Yeah, I wrote a story for Bleeding Green Nation this week with the 5 woulda, coulda, shouldas, and I think I as the last few days have gone on, realized I forgot probably 5 or 7 more. It could have been 10 or 12 in that article. I think the biggest butterfly effect one for me was in the second quarter when the Eagles are driving. They have the ball just past midfield. They've got a 3rd and 1. They're lining up for a QB sneak. They're up 14-7. They just forced a 3 and out on the Chiefs, and it looks like they're about to take control of the Super Bowl. And you get an Isaac Seumalo false start, which pushes him back to 3rd and 6. On the next play, Jalen Hurts, for some reason, just drops the football, kicks it away. It bounces right to the Chiefs. They run it in for a touchdown. All of a sudden, the momentum flips. It's 14-all. And even though the Eagles went into halftime with a 24-14 lead and had a 10-point lead that they really should not have relinquished in the second half, I thought that game could have been put away by halftime to the point where none of those second half heroics would have been necessary in order for the Eagles to win that Super Bowl. Just one slight little hesitation by Isaac Seumalo, I think, started a cavalcade of misfortune and mistakes and errors that ultimately led to the Eagles not winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you, John. I thought it was over at halftime. I really did. They dominated the first half so much. And I think the halftime and the differences in the Super Bowl, I think that's an understated. I think that's something you need experience. Kansas City's had experience with it. And then the field was a disaster and all that kind of stuff with Rihanna. A lot of intangible things that you can't really measure. Jody brought this up, so I want to know. You're giving Elizabeth Kubler-Ross a little too much credit today. But the Kubler-Ross model, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Where are you on the scale?
I'm kind of in the anger mode at the moment. I think... what's weird is I did the BGN Radio immediate reaction post game show right afterwards. So 20 minutes after the end of the game, I'm podcasting, and at that moment I was largely in acceptance mode. I was thinking about how well Patrick Mahomes played, the fact that Andy Reid really called a brilliant second half, and so much had happened that I hadn't really been able to pick apart all of the little different ways in which the Eagles shot themselves in the foot and in which the football gods just simply said, nope, not your night, not happening tonight. As the days have gone on, it's been harder for me to accept, which is unusual for me. After the Phillies lost the World Series, I think I was more emotionally upset about it. And then very quickly thereafter, I started to be able to appreciate everything they went through. The hollowness with which the 2022 Eagles season ended, I think, was really hitting home in the days after, because you realize they're not going to get another chance. The last time we saw Jalen Hurts make a play was on that 2-point conversion, and I think we all thought there would be another opportunity for him. He would get another chance. Like, that wouldn't be the end of the story for Jalen Hurts' season right there. And when the game ended the way it did with the referee's call and the Eagles not getting another chance to go down and kick a field goal after you thought emotionally for a moment, they got the big 3rd down stop, they're going to get the ball back, and the letdown from the call by the official, those things, and now you get all the all-22 analysis of what the defense did wrong. And you're seeing, like you talked about, John, the field slippage, so that the outside rusher is a huge part of what we thought was going to be important in this game, completely negated by the field and Hassan Reddick and Brandon Graham and Josh Sweat not being able to get home. All of those things, as they start to get put together, have made it harder for me to accept this Super Bowl loss as the days continue.
All right, let me ask you about one more what if. And it came with about 10 minutes to go in the game. Eagles have it 3rd and 2 on their own 32-yard line, incomplete pass. and Nick Sirianni decides to punt.
Mm-hmm.
Nick has kind of set his own bar. He is Mr. Aggressive. He is the guy who goes for it on fourth down. But they were at their own 32. It wasn't mid.
Yeah.
Their own 32. And of course, here comes Aaron Sipas with the lousy punt, and back we come to the 5-yard line. So that just adds to the pain of them not going for it on fourth down. I've heard some people give him a hard time and go, how can Nick get away from what Nick is? I didn't. I thought, of course, he's got to punch the 30.
I didn't even think about it, by the way. I didn't. Yeah. I'm surprised. I'm glad you brought that up, Jody. And I wanted you to chime in on this, Joe. I'm surprised how many people criticize that. To me, I didn't even think about that. You're at the 30. You're at your own 32. Now, if it's plus field, yeah, go for it. I'm with you. But 32, I think there was a lot of emotional criticism. We're going to get into it with Jonathan Gannon, but yeah, the 4th and 3. Did that upset you at all?
No, in the moment it didn't. I thought they have to kick it here. And I think people are pointing to the fact that they went for it against the 49ers 2 weeks before in the championship game on their own. I think it was 36. Yeah. But the big difference is that it was 4th and 1. Yeah. And you knew with the quarterback sneak. Yeah, exactly. And you know they're converting that. With 4th and 3, and it was on the broadcast, it said if you look in the game log, it said 4th and 3. So I've been going with 4th and 3. That is not a gimme. That is a 50-50 proposition, I think, at best, even as good as Jalen Hurts is and the Eagles offense is. And at that point, you're down 1. If you turn the ball over there, I think not if we'd have known that Aaron Sipas was going to shank the punt, obviously we go for it in that situation. But you don't expect that to happen. You expect him to hit the punt where it's supposed to go, for the Eagles to go down and cover and get yourself a little bit of field position, other than just handing Kansas City at least 3 points, if not more. If we'd known they were going to return it to the 5, you go for it. Yeah, exactly. But you don't know that in the moment. And in that spot on the field, with it being 4th and 3, I don't go for it. If it's 4th and 1, yes, I go for it in that spot.
And oh, by the way, if you don't get it, you're turning the ball over to what? Josh Johnson last week? You're giving it to Josh Johnson as compared to giving it to Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City offense. Yeah. A little bit of a difference as to how much you're just handing points to the other team, the probability thereof. All right. Well, let's do the Jonathan Gannon thing. John and I talked about it at the top of the show. John's a big fan. I'm a pretty damn big fan. Maybe not as big as John, but I'm certainly more of a fan than a detractor. I get it. For those people who don't like him, and the defense came up small in the Super Bowl, big picture, whatever you want. The level of disdain, the amount of hatred that this guy gets boggles mine and John's mind. You got an explanation for it? Like I asked John, is he like, are there viral videos I haven't seen of him picking on kids? The way that people talk about him, you think like he's an evil person. Yeah. I don't get the true level of hatred for this guy running his you-know-what out of town. Why is it that Eagle fans dislike this guy as much as they do?
I'm not a fan of Jonathan Gannon. I'm happy. I'm one of the people who is happy that he's gone. And it's not that I have a personal dislike for him. I just thought that his defense and his defensive philosophy specifically had a ceiling on it. And I think we saw that against Patrick Mahomes. And we've seen that when he's played a good quarterback going back to last year. 8 games against Mahomes, Brady, Herbert, Dak, Carr, Aaron Rodgers this year. The defense has given up about 35 points on average in all of those different games. Now, I understand those are great quarterbacks. Those quarterbacks will have great days against even the best defensive minds in football. But I think we didn't ever see him shut down a great quarterback one time in the 2 years that he was here. And I think even more than that, the level to which they were unprepared to deal with what Kansas City was throwing at them, and to not change things up. Once you saw what the field conditions were like, that your front 4 was not going to be able to generate the kind of pressure that you needed them to generate in order to do what you want on the back end. They just made things way too easy for Mahomes. There were just way too many guys who were wide open. And I thought that the defense did not come out particularly prepared for what Kansas City was going to throw at them. I look back to how Kansas City performed against Jacksonville and Cincinnati the 2 previous weeks. He had a much tougher road against those defenses than he did against the Philadelphia defense. I did not like how they were giving so much space on some of these plays, especially in the second half, when you already had one half of football and 3/4 of football to see that what you had been doing wasn't working. I just thought there was a lack of adjustment in this game. And for an Eagles defense that had as much talent on the field, maybe one of the most talented defenses in terms of personnel maybe this team has ever had before, to give up 24 second half points to the Kansas City offense, I thought was awful. And I don't see, if you're the Arizona Cardinals, how you can watch that film and say, that's my guy. I think that there's better out there. I did not think Gannon got the most out of the personnel that he had this year.
All right. I'm not picking on you, John, but
sure.
I hear that word adjustments all the time. I don't like that word for this reason. One, most fans, and again, not you, but most fans, they just say that word as a cure-all, you got to make adjustments. Well, what are those adjustments? Then I go back to the first half you and I were talking about. We were on the same page. Why the hell are you making adjustments from the first half? You dominated the game. Why are you going into halftime and saying, I got to make adjustments? They're dominating the football game. They should have been up 24-7. They were up 24-14. Everything's going to plan. And my last point would be, look, Hassan Reddick is a great player. Some bad luck. Defensive Player of the Year candidate. Everybody knows how much I love Slay. All-pro corner, one of the best corners in football. James Bradbury, career year, phenomenal. Those guys play bad football. At what point do we blame the players?
Yeah.
I mean, but what, I guess, first off, what is he adjusting to when you dominate a first half?
I think the issue is Kansas City didn't have the ball much in the first half. So you're right. There wasn't a whole lot to see except for that opening drive with how open Kelsey was and the fact that you could tell that they were not going to be able to get home on Patrick Mahomes. I thought one of the adjustments they should have made was to shore up the running game. And they didn't ever do that in the second half. Even in the limited time that Kansas City had the ball in the first half, they were getting 5-6 yards on first down running the football, setting up way too many third and shorts. The Eagles defense on first down were losing every time. And it was putting Kansas City into very makeable third down plays where you couldn't just go all out with a pass rush on third down. You didn't force them into very many passing situations where you knew that Mahomes had to chuck the ball up, where then you can stunt Hassan Reddick, where you can bring an extra guy. I thought Gannon came into the game. Understandably, the Kansas City did not have a great run game coming into the game, but once you saw how things were playing out there, especially I would say into the fourth quarter, I hear you. Maybe you don't come out in the third quarter and change things up, but once you get into the fourth quarter and you see what's working and what's not working, you might work on shoring up the run game so that they're not getting 2nd and 4 and they're not getting 3rd and 2 every single time. That's one of the big adjustments I would have made. And I think we saw that with Gannon in the games against the 49ers and the Giants. He focused on stopping the run game in those particular games. Again, because probably not as worried about the quarterbacks in those particular games. But you have to get yourself into 3rd and longs in order to give your defense a chance to get to Patrick Mahomes and force a turnover. And I don't think on the early downs, as the game went along in the late 3rd, 4th quarter, he did enough to say, listen, we're not going to give them 5 and 6 yards on first down every time.
We mentioned this earlier about the stages of grief, and you said yours are a little out of whack because you had gotten to accept it shortly after the game, but now you're in anger.
Yeah.
Let me deal with anger.
All right.
I'm hoping a lot of the Philadelphia Eagle players are in the anger stage. And I hope they stay there like all off season. So they carry that anger with them into training camp. So they come in with a bit of a chip on the shoulder because they know they were this close to taking down a chip. Is this a good group for that? Do you see that in a lot of Eagle players? That one of the things we like about this team when it shows up for camp is, oh, yeah, they're all showing up with an attitude that they were this close and they're not going to let that happen again.
I 100% believe Nick Sirianni is going to come in with a chip on his shoulder, and Jalen Hurts will come in. Jalen Hurts has a chip on his shoulder all the time. So, and I think that filters down from those two guys, and that will be the tone. I think you're right from training camp on. We have unfinished business. We got so close. They were. I mean, when you talk about how close this Super Bowl is, they were one play away from winning this Super Bowl. One sack, one turnover, one bounce of the football, one stop, one false start penalty, one holding penalty. Any one of the 12 tiny things that didn't go their way in the Super Bowl, they're Super Bowl champions. That's got to eat at them this entire summer. So I do think they'll have that chip on their shoulder. And I think they'll still be an extremely talented team in 2023. And that, of course, means more than having the chip on your shoulder. But they're gonna be hungry. There's no doubt they're gonna be hungry. And I think it all comes from the head coach and it comes from the quarterback.
You're right, by the way, with Nick Sirianni, his competitiveness, Jalen Hurts. But I will say, this team's going to lose some talent, specifically on the defensive side of the football. It's going to be very difficult to keep James Bradbury. It's going to be very difficult to keep one of your linebackers, and they're probably not even going to try to keep one because Nakobe Dean is waiting in the wings. Safety, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Do you want to pay him $14 million? That's a big chunk of change for a safety who had a career season. Is it going to continue moving forward? Defensive line, you have Brandon Graham, you have Fletcher Cox, you have Javon Hargrave. All these decisions you got to make. Oh, and by the way, you got to extend the quarterback from 47 to 52 million. We'll put it in that range. Howie's got his work cut out for him. We'll go back to Gannon again because you just mentioned the ceiling of this team. The ceiling of this team was number 2 defense, 16 yards behind number 1. They're a play away from winning the Super Bowl. The assumption, I think, from a lot of people is we're going to be right back. You lost your offensive coordinator. You lost your defensive coordinator. We all think Brian Johnson's going to be the next OC, probably Denard Wilson, but there may be more wiggle room at DC. Those guys were behind these guys for a reason. We saw it with Andy Reid back in the day. We saw it with Doug Peterson. Once you start losing good assistant coaches, it becomes more difficult. Did the Eagles miss their shot?
History tells you that there's a good chance they did, and that's why this hurts so much. They might, they could conceivably have a better team next year on the field and things go wrong and you not get as far. You run into bad luck in a divisional round, or who knows how much the Cowboys are going to do this offseason to improve themselves in the division. I think we forget about the fact the Cowboys were awfully good this year during the regular season. Dak Prescott has the Eagles number usually when they play, but we didn't see Jalen versus Dak this year, so that certainly will be fun. But they have the best quarterback in the NFC, and when you have that, and really he's one of maybe 2 or 3 elite quarterbacks in your conference, you have as good a chance as anybody else to get back to the Super Bowl every year as long as he's healthy and effective. So you have confidence in Jalen Hurts at least, and you have confidence that so much of the offensive nucleus, you mentioned free agents, most of those all on the defensive side. The offensive nucleus is largely intact. You got to figure out running back. We don't know if Kelsey is coming back, and you don't know about Isaac Seumalo. I think most people think he's probably leaving. You did draft some guys in this last draft with the idea that they would be able to step in. Jordan Davis should be able to step in for Fletcher Cox or Javon Hargrave in some capacity next year. And he's supposed to be an impact player. He should be an impact player in year 2. Cam Jurgens should be able to take over at center or at guard for one of those 2 guys in year 2 and be effective. Nakobe Dean should be able to take over for TJ Edwards or Kaiser White in one of those two spots in year number 2. That's why you drafted those guys, and you're going to have some high draft picks in this draft as well. So you give yourself a chance, and if I'm not mistaken, the Jalen Hurts contract extension, the big number might not kick in until after next year, right? I mean, you get to still have him on the rookie deal in 2023, so you can still build up the team around Jalen Hurts, especially on the defensive side, with a bunch of one-year deals like they did this year. We saw how well that worked out. There are some guys I would certainly target. I think CJ GJ is my number 1 offseason free agent signing because of his age. He's still really young. He's much younger than the other free agents that are out there. If you can sign Bradbury to a contract that makes sense, he'd probably be my number 2. With Hargrave, I worry about him declining as he's getting older into his 30s now. So I'm not sure that I would hitch my wagon to a long-term deal to Javon Hargrave, especially when you have Jordan Davis, the guy you drafted last year, to supposedly help you at that position. But there are a number of questions, like you mentioned. The defense is going to look very different next year, but they still have Hassan Reddick. They still have Josh Sweat. They still have Darius Slay, Avonte Maddox. You're going to have some decisions to make other places, but you're bringing back a team that, like you said, is hungry. They should have enough of a nucleus to make another run at this thing, and you have the best quarterback in the conference.
No, John, you mentioned next year could be a better team, and just the break doesn't go your way. It goes against you rather than for you. I'll run the ire of the Eagle fans here. Kind of like the 49ers when Brock Purdy went down and the game was over and done with. If that's Jalen Hurts, we're going, oh my God, what the hell happened? But we laugh because it happened to Brock Purdy. It could go the other way next year. And if it does, and oh, by the way, up until kickoff on Sunday, I was still going, I wonder what the real number is on Jalen's shoulder. And then he goes out and has the greatest Super Bowl in the history of Super Bowls, passing number-wise. So you didn't even know about him. But Hurts gets hurt next year in the postseason. Who's going to be their backup quarterback?
You know, it's funny. I haven't even looked to see who's available. I wouldn't bring Gardner back. I think we saw that he's got some limitations there. But yeah, I don't know. I don't even know who's on the free agent market that they could go out and get as a backup quarterback. I'd have to look into that. But they got to get somebody who can keep the offense afloat for 3 or 4 games. And that's all you want from a backup quarterback, is if something happens with Jalen Hurts where he has to miss 3 or 4 games, you want a backup quarterback that can win you 2/3 of those games, right? That can beat the teams that you're supposed to beat, like the New Orleans Saints. Gardner Minshew goes into Dallas, loses a hard-fought game. Okay, you can accept that because it's your backup quarterback. He gave you a great shot to win that game, even though he also threw a couple picks. The way he played against New Orleans is unacceptable for a backup quarterback. You need somebody who can beat. New Orleans was probably a little better than their record, but that's a game you have to win, and he played awful in that game. So they do need to go out and get somebody who can step in for 3 or 4 weeks at a time and win 2 or 3 of those games that Jalen Hurts misses.
Backup quarterback will be key, and it'll be interesting the way the Eagles go about it because they value that position so much. If they go in the draft, if they like somebody in the middle rounds, I don't think we're going to have a situation where Jalen's going to be upset like former quarterbacks that shall go unnamed. But I think that's kind of way down on the list. Now, on the other hand, Jalen plays the way he plays, and now that you play 17 games, there is a chance he's going to miss a game or 2. So it would be nice to get competency in that position, but that's way down my list. I got so many problems. But I bum Howie Roseman, and hopefully we're going to get to talk to Howie at some point this week. It's going to be interesting because he's coming off just a phenomenal season. And I want to talk about career seasons. Howie Roseman just had a career season. But all the way up and down this lineup, on the defensive side of the ball, Hassan Reddick, career year. Josh Sweat, career year. Javon Hargrave, career year. James Bradbury, career year. TJ Edwards, career year. Marcus Epps, CJ Gardner-Johnson, career years for their, skill set, for their level. Obviously, guy like Marcus is a little bit different than CJ, but all these guys playing at this optimal level, from following sports, from baseball, you see career years. You generally don't go career year. There's generally a regression back to the mean. Then you go back to the offense and Miles Sanders, and he's probably not even going to be here. But Isaac Seumalo had a career here. He's probably not going to be here. On and on and on throughout the lineup, guys playing at this optimum level. Do you expect a regression back to the mean from that standpoint?
I think in some cases, but I think in other cases, some of it is, I think, the true talent level of these guys. I think Hassan Reddick is good enough to replicate what he did this year. I think Josh Sweat is good enough to replicate what he did this year. I think James Bradbury is in the right system, able to replicate what he did this year. Some guys will regress, and there will be regression to the mean. And some guys who didn't maybe play particularly well this year will improve into next year. There's a little bit of that give and take, and that's why I think, getting another defensive coordinator in here, it'll be interesting to see whether or not, I don't think there's going to be a change from what Jonathan Gannon did to something like what Steve Spagnuolo does. There's not going to be that radical a sea change, I don't think. Nick Sirianni, it seems to me, has a way that he wants his defense to play. But I think that's fair. I think it's fair to expect a regression from some of the guys, and you could certainly see if Howie Roseman, who he brings in, whether or not those guys have good years. But a career year is a career year, because generally speaking, you have it once in your career, and after that, it comes down a little bit. And I don't think Brandon Graham is going to be back, and if he is, I don't think we can expect a double-digit sack season from him again this year too. So I think that's part of the issue with the defense as well. They got so much from their front four just on their own, those guys rushing the quarterback, that I don't think you can count on that kind of pressure from just those four guys again. And so you need to figure out some other way. We saw what happened in the Super Bowl when those front four guys are not getting home. There was no answer. I think they got to figure out a way to make this a better defense when your front four is not constantly winning and getting home all the time.
All right, I'm going to throw a hypothetical your way, and it's kind of a crystal ball thing. Adam Schefter yesterday hasn't reported that it's a done deal, but he said that you go ahead and book it, that Johnson is going to be the next offensive coordinator for the Eagles. Makes a ton of sense. His ongoing relationship with Jalen since he was a kid, having played for his dad, just makes too much sense not to happen. So if we accept that's a very high probability of happening, that he's going to replace Shane Steichen as their offensive coordinator, is he going to call the plays? Because Nick Sirianni came in here, handful of games in, he said, let me take a step back. I know Shane Steichen. We're like this. Coach with him in San Diego. He was an offensive coordinator elsewhere in the league. Brian Johnson's never done that before. And you're going to be asking him to do it on the fly, move up from quarterback coach to offensive coordinator. Or does Nick Sirianni jump back in and go, yeah, let me go back to calling plays? Which way does it go? Will Brian Johnson not only be the offensive coordinator, but will he be the play caller at the beginning of next season for the Eagles?
See, I think it's going to be harder for Nick to mug to the camera if he's worried about calling plays.
True.
So I don't think he's
going
to want
in front of your face does no justice to your mugging.
No. I don't think he's going to call the plays. I think my sense from watching him on the sideline and from some of the comments that he's made over the last year is I think he understands that freeing himself up from that allows him to be more in tune with what's happening in the game. And I think we're seeing more offensive-minded head coaches have an offensive coordinator call plays. Now, Andy Reid doesn't do that, of course. He calls his own plays, but he's been doing it for better part of 2-3 decades now. So he's got that down. I think Brian Johnson will call the plays. I know he's had some play calling experience in college, but not at the pro level for sure. But, they're going to set Brian Johnson up for success to be able to do this well. And I think when it's Sirianni's offense, they're not asking him to create an offense. You're going to continue to have the passing game coordinator in place. Jeff Stoutland is going to continue to coach up the offensive linemen and the run game. And really, the game plans are put in place by the entire offensive staff. It's just you come down to game day and you've got your offensive coordinator dedicated to kind of getting into a play calling flow. Might not start off great. There might be some stumbles as he learns, but I do think that Brian Johnson will be given the opportunity to call plays. And Nick Sirianni, I think, is very happy to kind of be the field general and not be bogged down in the minutia of trying to figure out what play to call.
At John Stolnis, last one from me. Follow John on Twitter. Read him at Bleeding Green Nation. The Good Bites, if you want some Phillies. Pitchers and Catchers Report. So, if you want to get over your disappointment, start paying attention to the Phillies.
Yep.
You mentioned we've been through this before. And when you lose assistant coaches and didn't work out well with Doug Peterson. And part of the reason it didn't work out well is because Howie Roseman and to a lesser extent Jeffrey Lurie like to get involved. Deservedly so, by the way, because they've done a really good job. For people that don't know, Howie Roseman was the one who found Brian Johnson for Nick Sirianni. Those two didn't have a relationship. Nick does have a very, very close relationship with Kevin Patullo. In a lot of ways, that's his right-hand man. If this were a vacuum, I would bet on Kevin Patullo being the next offensive coordinator. It's not. Jalen Hurts is very close to Brian Johnson. Jalen Hurts is the superstar, and I use that term. He is a superstar now, and they want to make him happy, and Brian Johnson's going to be the offensive coordinator. Kevin Patullo might go be Shane Steichen's offensive coordinator. He might go be Jonathan Gannon's offensive coordinator. You can't block guys from coordinator jobs anymore. Could this be the start of another Doug Peterson situation where the head coach is pushed in a direction he doesn't want to go by the organization?
It certainly could be, and that was one of the complaints we had about Howie Roseman during the Doug Peterson era. I didn't love Doug's coaching choices, but I thought as a Super Bowl winning coach, he deserved the right to decide what his staff was going to be. I think there's that possibility for sure. We're going to see if things go south in 2023, there will be more pressure on Nick Sirianni by Jeff Lurie and Howie Roseman to perhaps change things up. I think that's why we saw that with Doug Peterson. We saw with the offense it start to fall apart, but we also saw that the quarterback had some serious issues back at the end of Doug Peterson's tenure. So I don't think we're going to see that with Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni. You never know. And yes, if things go a little bit south, I have no doubt that Jeff Lurie and Howie Roseman will make their voices heard. But I do hope that everybody learned from the mistakes of the last time, learning from meddling too much, learning from alienating your Super Bowl winning head coach, and maybe wouldn't go down that road again until it was absolutely necessary. But I can't rule it out for sure, because you have these two guys who are very successful. They are very involved in the team, and they want to have control over every aspect of it. And Nick Sirianni does not have a long history as a head coach. Next year will be just his third year. So like Doug Peterson, Nick Sirianni is in kind of a similar spot. And I wouldn't be surprised if we have some of the same kinds of issues if things go south.
All right, last one for me again. Crystal ball for you. Who has more rushing attempts for the Philadelphia Eagles next year? Jalen Hurts or Kenneth Gainwell?
That's a good question. I think they're going to go out and get another running back. I don't know if it's going to be a star. It might be someone that they draft maybe with their late first round pick. I know that would be unusual for them to use a first rounder on a running back. But if they don't want to go out and spend money in free agency, they might use that. They might trade back from 10, get themselves, a later first and another second or something like that, and use one of those on a running back. Point is, I don't think Kenny Gainwell is going to be the number one. And even when you do have a number one, as we saw with Miles Sanders, sometimes that number one just goes AWOL for 2, 3, 4 weeks at a time.
By the way, I should have brought, when I talked about players not performing up to their level in the Super Bowl, I should have started with Miles.
Yeah, he's in that.
I wonder if he was hurt, man. He
was
like
hurt. He got hurt on the first
yeah.
play, ironically, when he made a mistake, and he was hurt. But I mean, getting back to the original point, Miles Sanders, Quez Watkins, we didn't even get to the offense.
I know.
Guys didn't perform up to the level they showed the entire season.
Right.
And they still only lost by 3 points.
And I think that's, if you would have told me that they were only going to lose by 3 points on a last second field goal, and you didn't generate a single sack on Patrick Mahomes from your front four, and you couldn't run the ball with your running backs, I would have told you you're crazy. I would have thought we were losing by 3 touchdowns.
Patrick Mahomes' longest pass play was for 22 yards, and he didn't have over 200 yards passing. And they lost by a field goal.
You can see why I'm not in the acceptance phase yet of all of this just yet.
But that's why sometimes you need to put the stats to the side and go, if I look at these stats, it doesn't add up for me. How the hell did this game go this way? Well, it did. We actually watched it with our own 2 eyes. Johnny Stolnis, always appreciate it when you come aboard. We're going to hit you up plenty during the offseason. Thanks for contributing as much as you did during the year.
Absolutely. It was fun, guys. Anytime.
Thanks, John.
Our pleasure. That's John Stolnis, Bleeding Green Nation, here with us on Birds 365. Just so you know, the last question I asked, rushing attempts this year, Miles Sanders, 259, Jalen Hurts, 165, Kenny Gainwell, 53. So if you think Gainwell's going to get more, if he's going to be the number one back, well, then he should get the same number of carries that Miles gets.
He's not going to be the number one back. He's going to be an important part of that offense.
Then who is?
He's not here yet. It's going to be a draft choice, but I don't. It's going to be a second, third round pick. It's not going to be a first round pick. The Eagles aren't going that route. It's going to be somebody who's not here. It might be somebody in free agency. It might be they don't want to spend a lot of money on that position, and they're right. Isaiah Pacheco showed you that in the Super Bowl. They're going to go a different direction at running back because they don't value the position, and you can find it might even be Trey Sermon. I mean that's he might show up in training camp and say, "Oh, this guy's pretty good. He can get 900 yards for us." That's all the Eagles need. That's all they want.
Now he's under contract, right?
Yeah.
He's locked in because I did like Sermon at Ohio State. I thought the Eagles made a smart move by picking him up this year. We heard his name most often on and inactive for the Philadelphia Eagles. Trey Sermon. He was inactive basically every single game that he was here.
By the way, I don't think it's going to be Trey Sermon. I'm just saying. They're going to pick up somebody, most likely a draft pick. They got to go cost effective. They got to change this thing. And John's right. The big money for Jalen Hurts isn't going to kick in for a couple years, but you still have to start. It's about more than 1 year. You have to start doing things in a different way because you know that shoe is coming, and it starts with positions that you don't value as much. So obviously running back is a position where, again, I bring up Isaiah Pacheco. That's a 7th round pick rookie who's playing pretty well in the Super Bowl. So it gives you an indication that you can get the production you need at a very cost effective rate at that position.
You just gave me the number yesterday, like $4 million and change for Jalen this upcoming year. If they just left the final year of his rookie deal in place, right, and didn't start the extension till scratch the year after, it's like $4 million and change this year for Jalen.
Yeah, for Jalen. Yeah,
right.
Now it'll go up. The cap number will go up, but you're talking about 47 to 52.
Right.
What was Kyler's guaranteed? You said it yesterday.
180 out of 230, 180 and change.
So you're talking about, let's say for argument's sake, you're talking about $200 million of guaranteed money. Well, you got to spread that out over the years. Now, Howie likes to use the multiple years trick. So he does that, but that $4 million number will go up. It just won't go up to a ludicrous degree as it will later in the contract.
Right. They're going to
189.5 guarantees for.
That's what I said. 180 and change. There will be more than just his salary. The question is how much if they get the extension done, and we got to find out if they can get the extension done. Everybody believes it's going to happen, but it's not done until it's done. All right, we're done for a couple minutes here. Gonna get a timeout in. Come back. I've got a couple more things to run by John. And, oh, by the way, coming up, joining us about 20 minutes from now is our buddy Bob Groats from the Delco Times. I guess we're going to start with James Bradbury because I love giving him a hard time.
By the way, real quick before we go to break, Lane Johnson had his surgery today. So Lane is on the way to healing now.
Knew it was coming. And man, did he just work his way through that pain and give up absolutely nothing in the postseason. He is stone cold amazing. All right, John McMullen Jody McDonald coming right back here on